Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice Time. Where we dive into some big ideas around the NHL. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined again by Justin Giampietro, who was on the preseason show or the preseason prediction show, which is why we have him on here. Justin covers the NHL, the Flyers, prospects at large, prospects in detail, a whole bunch of prospects actually recently, which check out a lot of the work in that regard as well. But covers a lot of hockey and does a lot of great stuff at the Hockey Writers. So Justin, how are you doing? And anything cool happened recently over the weekend, or anything cool going on these days?
Um, well, I already know we're going to discuss it. Uh, the World Series was, even though I did want Toronto to win, it was a great series. It was as good as you could have asked for. I feel like it's the best since the Cubs and Cleveland about a decade ago. It's up there. It's really up there. It was a great series. It was very fun to watch. Um, but yeah, we're going to discuss it a little bit more in detail. So
Yeah,
I'll let
we're
you.
gonna. I wanted to lead into that a little bit, being like, oh, anything cool happened over the weekend? I think every sports fan watched that World Series, watched Game Seven for sure, at least. Game Seven was funny because it was the same night, hockey night in Canada. Everyone was like, or there was a full slate of NHL games, and everyone was kind of tuned into what was going on in the World Series. And we're going to dive into a big topic soon, but I kind of want to get a few things out of the way. I'm going to tie these two things into the NHL. So don't worry, it's not a baseball podcast for anyone worried about that. But there's two things that stand out from this World Series. You mentioned it was a classic, and it was. It was one of the best World Series, certainly of this decade, the 2020 decade, which it's only there's only five of those, but in the past decade, yeah, you go back to that Cubs and Cleveland series that was a classic as well. So it's up there. But before, like, there are two things that really stand out for me, and they're very like specific fun facts that I kind of want to get your thoughts on them, and then or any World Series thoughts that you might also have other than that. But the first one is the golden pitch scenario. Basically, for those that don't know, is a golden pitch is when the pitch can win or lose the World Series. To say how rare that is, there have been 123 World Series or 121 World Series, I think, if my math's correct. 1903 is when the World Series started, and two haven't happened. So it's like 121. There have only been nine World Series that have ended on a golden pitch, which is the pitch can win or lose the World Series. And the requirements are it has to go to Game Seven. The team that's in the field that's pitching is up by a run at least, and the team that's batting at least has a runner on base, and there's at least one out or whatever. There has to be enough outs for that as well. So it was extra innings in the Dodgers, and Yoshinobu Yamamoto was on the mound. He pitched that situation. And the reason I'm fascinated by this is because the hockey equivalent of this would be a golden goal, where the next goal wins or loses. We see it all the time in the playoffs, like Game Seven goes to overtime, and the next goal wins or loses the Stanley Cup. I mean, wins or loses the playoff series, which is always fun. And you're like the pressure is amped up. This is a similar situation in baseball. It's only happened twice in Stanley Cup final history. And this is a fact I love mentioning in the playoffs, and I love mentioning it again. It's a great trivia question for any hockey fan, which is only two skaters have scored a Game 7 overtime winner in the Stanley Cup final, the ultimate golden goal scenario. Although Canadian fans will be quick to point out the golden goal with Sidney Crosby, or even the one with McDavid, where in the Olympics or the Four Nations in overtime, but only twice. Pete Babando in 1950 and Tony Leswick in 1954, both on the Detroit Red Wings. No way anyone's going to get that correct. So fun, just fun fact about that. The other quick thing I just want to get your thoughts on this is a lot of times after a great World Series, one that a lot of people watch, and this one particularly, a lot of people in Canada watched who probably wouldn't watch baseball typically, but the Blue Jays were in and they were watching. And the immediate thing is people compare hockey to baseball, or the World Series to the Stanley Cup playoffs, the or the postseason to the Stanley Cup final, whatever it is. And the first thing I think about is, first of all, everyone's like, oh, what ending is better? I think we can agree that sudden death overtime is the best ending in sports. Sudden death in hockey is the best way to end a game of all the scenarios. Extra innings is kind of literally a barn burner. I think we actually saw one game become a barn burner where it was like, okay, I actually need to go to sleep. It's late. It went late. But I'm not, that's not the thing that's on my mind. The thing that really stands out is when people compare these is that they're not comparable. And I like to say that hockey's a test of your heart rate and your blood pressure. You want to see if you have a healthy heart. Watch some Stanley Cup final games, watch intense overtime games. That's going to test your blood pressure. If you want to test your breathing, watch the World Series, watch baseball postseason play, where every pitch you're breathe in, wait for the pitch to happen, big exhale, or something crazy happens and you're going crazy. Anyway, so it's like anticipation, that breathe in, breathe out. I just said a lot of stuff there, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on those two things or anything on your mind from the World Series that maybe ties into the NHL or Stanley Cup playoffs, or just anything in general. I just spoke a lot, so I'll just let you share your thoughts on anything that I mentioned or anything.
Well, now that you mentioned the golden pitch, at the time it didn't really seem like a big deal in my mind. Like, yeah, I recognized the how big the moment was, but I never thought about it as like this is the equivalent of game 7 overtime Stanley Cup final, or in like football overtime Super Bowl. Like, this is a big deal. It didn't really cross my mind, but now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, I witnessed a pretty spectacular moment in sports
Yeah, I
history.
mean, I'll just quickly let you know the reason why is because there were two runners on base, and the
Hmm.
Dodgers were up by one run, and there was one out, so the game ended on double play. It's interesting, by the way, just to quickly throw out the last time that this happened was that Cubs Cleveland World Series because there were two runners on, the Cubs were up by one. Anyway, I'll just let you go back to what you were saying, but just with that in mind, how cool that was.
I was done with my thought there, but yes, it is a really cool moment. Again, I was disappointed by the outcome, especially me being a Phillies fan. I wanted to see the Dodgers lose, but they did not. And playing into that a bit, I think that baseball and hockey, or specifically MLB and the NHL, they're both probably to me the top two, like, just grind it out sports that there are. You get very invested on a 162 game regular season, and the playoffs are very intense. There's really nothing like playoff baseball. I know that there's always going to be a debate, I think, between, I wouldn't say between hockey and baseball fans. I'm not sure that really is a thing, but people always argue like, what's the hardest sports championship to win? MLB is definitely up there. It is such a hard, it's so hard to go the full season. It's just such a grind, and I really respect it. And following the playoffs these last few years, again, as a person who roots for the Phillies, they've been in it. They went to the World Series in 22. Crushed my heart when they lost. That was really, really hard. I've seen the Eagles lose. I've seen the Flyers lose. I'm big Eagles, big Flyers fan, but nothing was like the Phillies. It really is a grind, and I feel for Toronto Blue Jays fans. I get it. I know what it's like, and it really stinks to lose. And hockey is kind of similar, where it's just a grind, and the playoffs are longer, um, and they're so physical. Such a hard trophy to win, the Stanley Cup. I have deep respect for both sports, for athletes in both sports, because again, it really is a test of wills.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is you mentioned the law. You're a Phillies fan. You're from the Philly area. The loss of against the Dodgers in the playoffs, and they've had a few tough postseason losses. And I think what's interesting is that there's been a lot of debate now about whether the Blue Jays loss is the worst Toronto loss. And I think what's interesting about why it's stood out is because losing in baseball is so sudden. You watch how Game Six ended. Also, it was a double play to end the game, and everyone was going crazy because they're like, oh, we can have a chance to win. All the Blue Jays fans, and then it's a line drive. The guy catches it, fires it second, game's over. Everyone's like, wait, it's over? That's it? In hockey or other sports, you could feel the puck goes into the offensive zone. You feel, okay, this could be a play that ends the game. You don't really, it's not so sudden. In baseball, it's one pitch and it's over. It kind of is interesting you mentioned that. But like, yeah, it is interesting because it's comparing it's like comparing completely different things, non-linear weights. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just interesting. And like, it's a reminder. Yeah, I can't wait for. I mean, the Stanley Cup playoffs are so long away. It's also similar to baseball. The season is so long. Both seasons are just so long. They're such a grind, and then you get into the postseason or the playoffs, and it's another level. It's just another gear of like intensity for both, and it's exciting. And also it reminds me of, yeah, playoff hockey is going to be great again, and we should look forward to that, especially games that go into overtime. We've talked a lot about baseball, more than I thought we would actually, because I thought I was going to do some quick thoughts on the World Series. But I mean, yeah, it's one of those classics, but we're worth diving into. So let's kind of dive into the big topic that we're here for. The topic I brought you on for because you were on for the preseason predictions, and we're 1 month into the hockey season. It's November, which means we've completed October in the hockey season. We're we are going to call this the Eat Crow episode. And it's actually interesting. Last year, I had you on for Eat Crow. I mean, I probably ate more crow in terms of predictions that are aged poorly, which is what we're going to discuss. So, which predictions we already can look back on and say, okay, yeah, that one's not happening, or that one's going to age poorly, already is aging poorly. I have a few that stand out, and I already know, yeah, I'm going to have to eat crow on them already. But I'll turn it over to you, Justin, to start. Which is the first prediction, or one prediction that really stands out? You're like, yeah, this is not my year on that one.
Well, I'm gonna do one for both of us a little bit. The Penguins are good this year. We'll see if they sustain it, but they're near the top of the league. If they win as we're recording, they're winning 3-0. If they win, they're going to be the best team in the NHL. And I don't know. I predicted them to be kind of a basement-esque team. I think a lot of people did. I recognize that they weren't as bad as some people were saying, but what they're doing now, I mean, they are, again, top of the league. They weren't even doing that when they were contending. So just a great season for them, led by a bunch of young guys. Ben Kindle, he was a guy that I covered actually over on the Hockey Writers. I did his prospect profile. I was super high on him. He was one of my favorite prospects in the draft. He has 2 goals in the game, again, as we're recording, against Toronto.
I think he's up to
An
five now.
18-year-old kid. What was that?
I think he's up to five now on the season, which, if I'm not
Yes, he
mistaken.
is up to 5. He's having again, this is an 18-year-old kid, and he is slotted in the lineup right away. He's playing power play minutes. I mean, this is just such a great run, such a great time to be a Penguins fan. You wouldn't think so, but it's nice to see the veterans and these young kids combining to be just a fun hockey team right now. Again, we'll see if that sustains itself. They are pretty high up on the PDO leaderboard, which is save percentage, shooting percentage combined. Usually you don't want to be very high up on it because it means that you're going to fall down. It's inevitable. You can't shoot whatever it is, 15% and save 9-20%. It's just not a recipe for sustainability. It does even out over the season, but they're playing good hockey right now, and we'll see if it sticks. But neither of us would have ever dreamed of mentioning the Pittsburgh Penguins as even a wild card team, and they look like they're a good bet to potentially be that this year, maybe even more.
They are the one. It's funny because I actually did have them as like one of the teams. I'm like, yeah, we have to eat crow on this. This is one that I think everyone has to, because for two, I mean, even if you want to say like after 1 month, okay, they'll regress or they'll be an average team, or the shoe will drop. Because what's interesting is when they got off to a hot start, I think they had like a 4 game winning streak, and everyone was like, oh yeah, don't worry, the shoe will drop, and they're gonna fall apart at some point. Like they're not a good team. We talked about the Penguins. I don't know if we did on our preview show, but definitely a lot of people, the consensus was they're going to be in that Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. They're going to be a bottom 5 team. And that's not happening. Even if you want to say, oh, even if they do struggle or regress, they're not going to be that. They're going to be a good team this season. I think the part that I'm willing to eat crow on is that, yeah, I thought they were going to be the worst team in the Metro, and they're going to be a good team this season. I know you mentioned goaltending, and I think you can look at goaltending and say, oh yeah, the numbers or their goals saved above average or goals above expected are way too high. That's going to regress, and it might, and I think it will. But their goaltending, you just look at it from a distance, or what the duo is. People are like, "Oh, Tristan Jarry is just doing way too good. He's not that good. He regresses too." Having a backup in Artur Silovs, who's not a backup really, he split starts. That changes Jarry. That makes Jarry a better goaltender. It's interesting because I think the same thing kind of happened with Elvis Merzlikins now, which is he's not a good starter, but if you're splitting starts with him, it makes him a better starter. And I think with the Penguins is their goaltending duo with Silovs and Jari is good enough to make them a 500 team down the stretch, even a 500 team down the stretch. Which is again, like you look at the Penguins and you're like, oh, they're high in the standing. What's going on there? But then you take a step back and look at some of the things that have contributed to that. It's goal like you have a good goaltending duo in a league where I mean, goaltending's kind of bounced back this season, but in general, goaltending's down, and have a duo like that, it goes a long way. You look at what I find fascinating with the Penguins, aside from like they've been a rebuilding team or sort of in the middle of rebuilding and not rebuilding, is the bet they made on players like Justin Brazeau or Ryan Shea or Parker Waterspoon. These players that are 26, 27, whatever, in a league that people are ready to give up on these young NHLers. They're like, okay, we've seen the best out of you in the AHL or as a developing prospect. And it's funny because I'm like the Capitals had the same thing, not just with Dylan Strome, but a lot of players that was like they said we're buying in on these 25, 24, 25-year-old players, and it worked out for them. It's fascinating that the Penguins are this type of team. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, but the idea that they're going to be a bottom five team, that's already not the case. And there's a good chance they are this season's Capitals, like where they are the best team in the Metro, and we're talking about them very differently, especially with the head of the deadline, which I think foils a lot of our plans because I think we had a lot of articles ready to go with all these trades potentially, whether it was Crosby, Carlson, Eric Carlson, Malkin, whoever it was. But now maybe that won't happen because like they're going to be in that they're going to be competitive enough where they have to buy in, and it just all these factors contributing to them, which is really fascinating. I'm going off here, but anything to add on the Penguins as I mentioned all these things?
Um, yeah, we'll see if they're this year's Capitals. That thought crossed my mind a little bit ago. It's very possible. It really is a possibility. I think that last year's Capitals were stronger on paper. I felt that way, and also they made the playoffs the year before, and they added to their team, so it makes sense why they were a good team. Obviously, they were borderline President's Trophy good, but it makes sense that they were a pretty good team. But the Penguins just kind of really out of nowhere. So yeah, I mean, it's good to see young players and guys like Brazo just figure it out. And like I said, we'll see if it sustains itself, if these guys can continue contributing. But it would be great to see. You do want to see more kind of, I don't want to say afterthought players, but not guys you would expect to be these high end contributors. Just kind of, you want to see them form, I guess. You want to see more of these guys. And they're great stories. These guys are great stories. The Penguins are a great story. I can't say that I hope it sustains itself as a Flyers fan, but it's good for the league.
No, it's also good for the league that Crosby and Malkin are playing competitive hockey, playing in playoff games, and I think it's interesting. You mentioned, I mean, I mentioned the Capitals, and the two parallels that stand out are Dylan Strome again, like who it took a while to develop, but all these teams, the Chicago Blackhawks were like, we don't see them in our as part of our rebuild. And now what do they need? They need young NHLers. All these rebuilding teams, the big thing that they need is young NHLers, and now these teams have them. And the other part is the farm system, which the Capitals have had a good pipeline for years. With Hershey as big development bastion for young players, and Pittsburgh's kind of got that now with what Wilkes-Barre looks like, but I digress. That's just me diving into the AHL too much, and I don't think anyone's here for that. I'll shift to one of my big ones, and this one I really have to eat crow on because this looks really bad early on. I had the Calgary Flames in the playoffs, which I ignored all the warning signs, and which was okay, their forward, they still don't have scoring. Their offense was terrible last year. And I was like, they'll bounce back or they'll look better offensively. They can't look as bad as they did last season. Well, turns out you can, and then some. So that was warning sign one of the warning signs there. It's an older team in the sense they have the young prospects still kind of working their way into the lineup and working their way into the team, but Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri, all those players are now a year older and a year worse, I think. I mean, Kadri's still playing well. I think there's a few players that are still playing well, probably because they're looking for a contract or a trade of some type. But anyway, I ignored that. And the third part is Dustin Wolf, which he's not. Again, this is the same sort of conversation we had around the goaltending duo, which is they were overconfident that he could carry them and be their primary starter. And I'm watching him now, and it's like, okay, they kind of left him out to dry there, where they don't have a backup there. I think they underestimated how good Dan Vladar probably was as a backup, and then overestimated how good Dustin Wolf could be as a primary starter. I have to eat crow on this. I don't think you picked the Flames. You probably weren't high on the Flames. So I wonder what exactly did I miss? I kind of brushed over some of the things, but what did I miss? Slash, what are your thoughts on the Calgary Flames just early on in the season? I think they have the worst record in the Western Conference, and all those trade rumors are really going to start heating up, especially since teams love centers, and Nazem Kadri is a good center. Teams love shutdown defensemen, and Rasmus Anderson can be one of those players potentially on a team. So just your thoughts on the Flames, and what did I miss about them? Because I was not just wrong, I was really wrong, even though they were a borderline playoff team last season, and now they're not.
I could see the argument for that being in the playoffs. I mean, it made sense to me. I didn't have them there, but again, I could reasonably see that argument because I was as high on Dustin Wolf as probably anybody, and I still am. Nothing's changed. He has played. He's on pace, I think, for like Martin Broder type starts. He is playing every game, literally every game for them. I think he's not played one at this point. It might be two by now, but he's playing a lot of hockey. I'm still very high on him. I still think he's going to be the best goalie in the league someday. Maybe not now, but someday I do think that's his upside. This is a guy who's dominated every league he's been in. Last year, he really carried the Flames. They had a very poor goal differential, like bottom of the league type goal differential. So I think that's kind of what cooled me off on them. It's like, are they going to keep winning these close games? Is Dustin Wolf going to keep carrying them to wins in these close games? He did against the Flyers the other day. But again, I wasn't sure that that was going to sustain itself. The Capitals were kind of a similar team, actually, in 24 when they made the playoffs. Bad goal differential, winning a lot of close games, but they turned into what they did. Calgary, complete opposite. What's happened to Calgary now is kind of what I thought might happen to the Capitals. I was very wrong on them last year. I think Calgary bounces back a little bit. I don't think they're quite worst team in the league. Maybe they are, but again, I mentioned that Wolf stole them a lot of games. He's going to start doing that again with more frequency. Just kind of a rough start. And when your best player isn't playing that well, you're not going to play that well. If he returns to anything like he was last year, I don't think they're a playoff team, but they will be a little bit more respectable, I'd say. So I'm looking out for that.
It's interesting that they're gonna bounce back because I mean, yeah, Wolf is gonna bounce back. He is one of those elite young goaltenders in the NHL, and there aren't that many. I mean, there's him, there's Lucas Dostal, there's a few that you could think about that are like, oh yeah, they're elite young goaltenders. in the league. He's one of them that can, and that's why I was high on the Flames. I was thinking they're the next version of the Winnipeg Jets, which is sure they don't have star power, elite star power, although the Jets actually do, but we don't need to dive into that. But they don't have elite forwards or elite defensemen per se, but it doesn't matter when you have the best goaltender in the game. Goaltender will single-handedly take over games. And I think Wolf is going to bounce back. I think what's interesting is that you look at the Flames now. The saying goes that you can't win a title in the first month of the season, but you could certainly lose one. That applies, again, to all sports, really. Just that first month, you can't win one, but you certainly lose one. And they already have done that where it's like they've lost that. And now that I look at it, I'm like, there's a chance they are the worst team because you're already behind here. There's that possibility you trade Rasmus Anderson, Nazem Kadri, maybe both, and there's Blake Coleman, I think but there's whatever they have those veterans that they probably want to move on from, and they're in that mix all of a sudden where for one of the worst teams in the NHL, one of the worst records in the NHL, you just hope they're a team that had a promising rebuild and still doesn't take a step back with that in mind, but that it's possible. It could happen. And I mean, maybe getting a top 5 pick though won't be the worst thing for the Flames if they could do that. We've talked a lot about the Flames just now, so I'll turn it over to you now, which is what's another one or two? You kind of overlapped with one of mine, so I feel like I've gotten two and you've gotten one. So what's another eat crow sort of prediction you have, or one that you kind of have to eat crow on already?
So far, I would say St. Louis. I had them as a wild card team. I was high on their run toward the end of last year, or specifically under Jim Montgomery. They were really bad to start the year. Then they hired Jim Montgomery, and they're really a wagon. And so far, hasn't really been the case. They're right ahead of Calgary, barely, for second last in the league. So they've been just as bad. And although both of them and Calgary are on the other side of the PDO spectrum that I mentioned, getting unsustainably bad luck, I'm not sure this really turns around. Maybe they can be a playoff team, but that is a big hole to be in, to be 3-7-2 so far. Again, they could bounce back. They did last year, but I would probably bet against it at this point. The West is looking pretty strong. There are some kind of surprise teams that are up there. I would say Chicago, they're winning games. Seattle, they're winning games. So just that gap, that early season gap already might be too much to make up by the end of the season.
It's the spiraling out of control. So it's a few things. So first of all, I think now there are like 5 losses in a row. I think one of them came in overtime, but 5 losses in a row or 6 losses in a row, which like when you start spiraling like that, I mean, I know the Blues are the peak example of, oh, you could turn your season around because they did it in 2018, 2019 when they hired Craig Berube midseason, and then all of a sudden they turned around, won the cup. But and they did have that 17-game win streak or 17-game point streak, something like that, which did cause them to rebound. It's interesting because the warning sign for me, actually, I haven't really watched a lot of Blues games. They're kind of one of those teams that all of a sudden I look at them like, wow, they've lost like 5 in a row. The warning sign for me actually had nothing to do with on the ice. It was calling up Dalibor Dvorsky and being like, we're going to put him on our power play line, which is they immediately were like, it's one thing to call up a prospect and be like, all right, we'll bring him up, ease him in. Dvorsky's a very talented player, very good player in Springfield, also not very good, but I digress. But very talented player. But it's one thing to bring them in and then say like, no, he's playing power play one. We're going to give him a lot of ice time, and that's a move. When you do that, you're saying, okay, we actually need our prospects to save the season or send a message, really turn around things around. And I saw it, I was like, that's not good there. What is interesting is that before the season, I actually wasn't high on the Blues, and this is one of the things that I didn't expect them to be this bad, but I was like, oh, they're going to miss the playoffs. And the two things were that win streak and goaltending. And it's interesting because you mentioned where they are on that the PDO or goal saved above expected, like those type of stats. And again, it's this issue of they don't have goaltending. Like Bennington when he's on, obviously. Like when the playoffs roll around or when he needs to have a big save, he can have it. But over the course of a season, it's just hasn't been there. And then Joel Hofer also has been really bad to start the season. And I wonder, did was that is that the big thing, goaltending, or is there maybe there's more issues there? Because I look at their roster, like if you look at their, let's say their 5-on-5s or their forward group or their defense. I mean, there's some injuries there, but they look like a good team there. But it's just goaltending there. I still look at goaltending. I'm like, oh no, this is a bad goaltending unit, and that's going to let them down. Is that what you're see? Is that what you kind of see there, where you're like, okay, I'm concerned, genuinely concerned they can't turn this around?
Well, I want to mention that I believe Robert Thomas has missed a few games.
Yeah.
I'm not sure their win-loss record with and without, but I guess that's notable. But yeah, it's been really, I would say, the goaltending. I haven't kept up with their game by game results like that, but I have noticed that goaltending's been a little bit of an issue. Uh, I was particularly high on their top pairing with Fowler and Parenko, and they've played pretty well if you look at the numbers. It's just that the rest of the team hasn't done as well. It is what it is. The goaltending could turn it around. Maybe they do. They did go on a hot run to end last year, so they have it in them, but yeah, just not a great start so far.
Yeah, and I think another thing to add just to the Blues is that they struck gold with Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. And I think they just got such a great season out of them, where to the point where if they're not having that type of season, all of a sudden it really just changes the overall roster outlook for them. And it is interesting because I'm like, well, what do you do to get a spark? Because you're not firing Jim Montgomery, especially after how well he did last season. I mean, I know teams are impatient, but they're not going to do that, and they're not. And I think they just pulled their desperation move, which is you get Dalibor Dvorsky onto the team, and you're playing him right away. It's interesting that goaltending's been terrible, and try to make a trade. I think what's funny is that the Sabres, who claimed Colton Ellis off waivers, a sneaky addition, have like 5 goaltenders. So if they could try to get one, maybe that just changes things a bit. But I don't know. Like I don't see it, and it is interesting because I don't know what they do if things don't turn around. Like where do they go? Because I don't know if they really sell at the deadline. They don't really have. They have a bunch of players with term that are younger players, so it's hard to see them doing that. They're in an interesting spot, and it's going to be interesting to see. I thought they were going to take a step back, but I didn't think they take this far a step back, and it is concerning for them. All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.